It was 9:30 when my shift at the diner ended. It's not any place specifically you'd know, though you'd be forgiven for confusing it for a Waffle House given the abundance of cheap, greasy food and drunk clientele. The only thing distinguishing our location was that our doors closed at 10. It was a cold night in October. The winds felt out of place for the fall season with the sharp way they bit into my skin. Usually, the low temperatures tended to hover around the mid-50s. Tonight felt particularly frigid, even bundled up in the warm confines of my jacket. I hurried through the lot outside the diner, passing by several vehicles. When I made it to my car at the far end, I unlocked the door and got in. I was quick to put the key in the ignition. My car was a special edition Subaru Legacy, but the only thing special about it was that it was only by the grace of God that my radiator and engine were still operational, given the car was a little over 2 decades old. When you turned the key, the engine would knock. My father said it was indicative of worn-out bearings. Could be an engine getting ready to declare sayonara before it crapped out one final time and departed for car heaven, or perhaps car hell given its rough condition. I knew little about that though. All I knew was that as a poor college student I was having a difficult enough time as is scrambling to make ends meet with a part-time job at a diner. Regardless, whatever the solution, the answer involved money. Money I notably didn't have. The smart thing to do would be to purchase another used car, though in this economy that sort of thing is far easier said than done. An even harder task than figuring out the financing for a replacement vehicle was getting this stubborn thing to turn. The engine threatened to exhibit life, but would stop short of properly starting. It was about the 5th round when my engine found the energy to fight the good fight on this frigid night. The engine knocked fiercely, reverberating inside the hood for a few seconds before the noise steadied itself. I sighed in relief and backed out of my parking spot in the back of the lot. As I left, I couldn't help but notice something out of the corner of my eye. A man, a very rugged specimen of the male species, adorning a blue baseball cap and a grizzly beard, was approaching my vehicle at a brisk pace. I was the only one stationed at the back of the lot. It seemed odd he was coming my way. I turned my head to acknowledge him. That's when he began to break out into a full-on run. My heart raced. I slammed the gas pedal down and sped out of the lot. The tires screeched loudly along the pavement as I veered into a sharp right turn. My eyes were so focused on him. I was damn near lucky I hadn't plowed directly into someone, but luckily, the road didn't carry heavy traffic around this time of night. I sped along the highway and tried to rationalize why this lumberjack-looking fellow had charged at me. News reports of human trafficking came to mind, but it wasn't really anything you heard much about in a place as remote as Grant, Alabama. We were physically so remote that one of the provinces within Grant was called Bucksnort. We were about as far from the Big Apple, or any real semblance of civilization, one could get. After a minute of driving, I slowed down, especially when I heard something rattle in the engine. This car wasn't designed for no races or wild chases. Not with the amount of age it carried. Besides, I was alone and safe. Or at least, that's what I thought before I heard the blaring of a truck horn. An 18-wheeler was coming up behind me. Given I was the only other soul visible on this lonely 2-lane stretch of highway, it was clear they were honking at me. I prayed to God and kept moving. The big rig followed closely. We went down the road for 2 miles when suddenly my vision was obscured in a bright light. The trucker was flashing his high beams. I could barely see when he hit me with them. I nearly swerved off the road when he did it. After a few seconds, the mounted floodlights on his vehicle relented, and the blinding rays ceased their assault on my eyes. I moved my car to the right lane to let him pass. He had no intention of doing so. His signal made that clear when he merged behind me. Drops of rain began to fall from the sky, lightly tapping my windshield. My car didn't handle well with slick roads. Fortunately, I wasn't too far from home. Maybe another 7 miles or so. The fiery orange glow flooded the cabin of my car, and I yelped. I fumbled for the phone in my pocket. One hand on the wheel, one desperately trying to grab my phone. With my visibility being periodically robbed, I was already a hazard on the road. Might as well risk compounding the issue if it meant I could get in contact with the police. When the high beams vanished, I managed to pull out my phone and dial 911. The operator answered after 2 rings. 911, what's your emergency? The man that answered the call sounded bored out of his mind, like he'd rather be anywhere else on a Saturday night. I didn't care if he was bored, entertained, playing with himself. As long as he could send someone out, that's all I cared about. There's a maniac tailgating me, I said. The operator's voice clipped, though from what I could understand of the roboticized sound coming out from his end of the line, I could tell from his tone he remained unenthused. You've called an emergency line. You don't understand. I was leaving work, and this man started chasing me. I think he's trying to hurt me. The operator fell silent for a few seconds. For a moment, between the rainy weather and the flaky signal, I thought I'd lost him. His voice reemerged seconds later. Where are you? I rattled off the highway number I was driving on and told him my home address. I'll get an officer dispatched in the area. ETA should be around 10 minutes. 10 minutes. 600 seconds. Toss whatever metric you wanted to use to measure it out. With that big rig riding close behind me, and the driver intermittently blinding me when they felt like getting their rocks off, it might as well have spanned an eternity. I was going to be lucky if I didn't crash into a guardrail or land myself in a ditch. Make that around 15 minutes, the operator clarified, his crackled voice twisting the knife deeper into me with his update. I made the turn off the Tulane highway. I didn't signal when I did it. I was hoping the sudden movement would have had my unwanted friend in the big rig blow past me. For a moment, I believed it worked. No more blinding lights. The only sound was the pitter-patter of rain on my windshield. My sigh of relief became a choking noise lodged inside my throat as I saw the 18-wheeler backing up. It didn't turn on a dime, but he was moving fast enough. The road up ahead winded with hairpin curves. I didn't know how long I'd have until those lights were upon me again. I cursed under my breath while my engine knocked like an irate person trying to beat down a door. My Subaru was rapidly approaching its limit. I had to think fast. These were my options. I could risk speeding and hope the engine would hold out till I made it to the house, or I could continue driving at a steady pace. If the first option proved successful, he might not see where my vehicle would vanish. If it didn't, my car might leave me stranded. That's assuming I didn't wreck myself taking a turn too fast. The other option would be safer, but I'd be visible to him. Though with some of these curves, I feared if he hit me with the high beams again, I'd be at risk of crashing. Where the area of road ascended, one wrong turn would mean a long journey down and certain death. Taking a sharp intake of breath, I pulled out my phone and called my dad. The only answer I got was his voicemail urging me to leave a message at the tone. Dad, there's a lunatic after me. I've called the cops. Please be ready. I'm only 2 minutes away. It wasn't the most inspiring call to action. My dad was no badass. He was soft-spoken and wouldn't hurt a fly. Still, I was counting on his presence to deter Mr. High Beams behind me. It was a desperate ploy, but it was all I could think of on such short notice. I made the turn into the dirt trail that led to my driveway. As I was pulling in, the porch light flickered to life. Maybe. It might have been those high beams. They illuminated my cab in a flood of light, once more obscuring my vision. The door to the house opened, and a figure ran out of the entryway. It was my dad from what I could discern of the silhouette. My dog Jasper, a black schnauzer with more bark than bite, darted out the door. I couldn't see the little guy, but I heard him. I stopped the car and shoved open the door. I bolted out of the seat, nearly tripping over my own feet with my frantic departure. Jasper started barking up a storm, even before the big rig came to a standstill. The door of it opened, and the bearded man stepped out of the vehicle. Strangely, my dog paid the trucker little mind. Jasper's eyes remained fixated on my Subaru. He began to snarl. Get away from the car, the man bellowed. He pulled out a gun and pointed it at an angle, almost like he was aiming at my vehicle. Was this how my life was going to end? Shot dead when I was at the finish line, where I was supposed to be safe. My dad babbled. Sir, please. You don't have to do this. The trucker shook his head. As he did, the sound of sirens began to blare in the distance. He didn't answer us. Instead, he lowered his gun into his holster and stood still as a statue, all while my dog continued snarling and barking at our vehicle. When the police came, guns drawn, he remained calm. I'm not the one you want, he said. The car. Search the car. Even to this day, I still remember in vivid detail what happened. When the police officer opened the rear driver door, there was a gaunt-looking man back there crouched on the floorboard with a knife clenched in his hand. The wide, manic look lingering in his eyes remained far colder than the frigid winds blowing around us. The trucker explained later that he saw the man inside my vehicle wielding the blade. He must have snuck inside before my shift ended. Once the truck driver realized what was going on, he tried to intervene. Every time the person in the back seat had attempted to overpower me, to harm me, the trucker turned on his high beams. It scared my unknown passenger. The sight of the light made him hide. The police hadn't offered much in the way of details concerning who my stowaway was. Given the 6 inches worth of blade he held, not much imagination was needed to map out what the strange man planned to do to me. I learned on that cold, lonely October night to never judge a situation wholly by appearances. I was grateful to that truck driver. If it weren't for his persistence, I would probably not be alive today to share this story.